Hi, my name is Betty Criddle. This isn't my choice thing to do, but when I think back in my life of 78 years, I would love to have a recording or information about my dad that was born in 1898 and my mom that was born in 1905. When I was young and they were alive, it wasn't that exciting. It isn't something that I really quizzed them on. What was life like? How did you do? All of those things. And I would like to record this for you, my kids, my grandkids, or whomever God wants to use it for. So I was born in 1943 in a little home, and I was born at home. And I had an older brother that was about 9 and an older sister about 1.5 when I was born. It was a little house, a little humble place, but it was my home. And my picture, the cutest baby picture, probably the cutest baby you've ever seen. And there weren't a lot of pictures but that. And then I also have a picture of the youngest picture of my mom and the youngest picture of my dad. This is my mom's graduation picture. And this is my dad's youngest picture. It's probably a confirmation picture or something. My dad was born in 1898, and his mom died in 1902. He was sent away from Cedar Rapids to live in Cedar Falls with his Danish grandparents. They only spoke Danish. When I went to the cemetery here, Oak Hill Cemetery, to see my grandma's grave and stuff, they looked it up, and she was in what's called a pauper's cemetery because they had no money, and there's no marker for her grave there. My dad went up to live in Cedar Falls, and times were not the easiest, and he was on his own at 10. He had 2 brothers, a couple years older, and they all went on their own, worked on farms, etc. He went through 4th grade. My mom was born in 1905 near Dike, Iowa. She went to Dike High School, graduated in 23, was going to go on to college, but that was during the Depression. So she got a job working in a home, which a lot of people did then, housekeeper, take care of babies, all of that kind of stuff. And my dad was a hired man at the same place. And that's how they met and got together. And they were both older, but they were married in 1933. We lived in a little Danish community. A lot of immigrants came from Denmark and settled in this area, and it's a little rural community, but there was a church with a cemetery, Danish services once a month, and everybody there, the joke was your name had to end in S-E-N or you really couldn't be part of the community. And then down the hill was a little one-room schoolhouse that I attended. We walked to the school, we walked, to church. My best friend always was my sister. We didn't have a lot of money. My dad worked in a factory, and my mom cleaned houses, cleaned country school houses, and did ironings for people. We had one bike, and my sister and I rode it up and down the neighborhoods to play with our friends. It's a wonderful, wonderful life when I look back on it, but it's so different than my kids had or my grandkids will have. It was a different kind of home. Very loving, very kind. I can't begin to tell you, looking back on it, just have pleasant memories. My sister and I walked to school together, walked home, had similar friends, and we still do. And we still talk probably 2 or 3 times a week and text back and forth too. So I am very blessed. My life in Dike School was fun, was wonderful. I was not into academics. I was into having fun, being social. Lived in the country, and my friends lived in town, so I stayed in town a lot of slumber parties. And my brother lived in Dike, and he worked in a factory after he graduated, a packing company. And he lived in Dike and was very, very likable man, and was very kind and would take me places, do things. I could use his car even before I had a driver's license, but that's a few years ago. In my home that was small but very nice, we had no running water. We had an outside toilet. So we went to the bathroom in what we called the pot, and every morning you had to take that outside and dump it. You'd always look to see if the bus was coming, because you didn't want to be taking the pot out if the bus was coming up the road. Also, we didn't have hot water. We had to heat the water on the stove on a Sunday night and pump it and all of that stuff for the laundry or doing the washing on Monday morning. The clothes, many times I remember, were hung through the house. There were little nails above the walls, above the windows, above the doors, little nails and little ropes like a clothesline, and that's where we dried our clothes in the wintertime. We probably had the best humidity ever in the house, which you didn't hire otherwise. And our stove in our house was not a furnace, it was an oil burner, and that heated the whole house from the living room. In the living room, there was a hole called a register, and you could see down from upstairs, and that's when where the heat went upstairs, which you knew didn't get a whole lot of heat when you had one little oil burner. And it was pretty cold upstairs, but we didn't even realize it because that's just the way it was. And we slept upstairs. Sometimes if you left water, there was water frozen. And my mom would take fruit jars and put hot water in them at night before we would go to bed and roll them up and down the mattress in the sheets so our bed would be warm. But you better be careful not to touch them in the morning because they'd be freezing cold. And my mom and dad had a big garden. They worked hard and did a lot of canning. And we had a fruit cellar in the basement. It was not a basement, it was a cellar. You'd go down and it was kind of damp, moldy, little, just enough for shelves all around the outside. The house, I think, was built in late 1800s, so you can picture it was an old house with an outside cellar door. So you can picture a little bit, maybe you can't, what that looked like. But they were very frugal, they were very hardworking, and my mom would clean houses for people, and also she cleaned country schoolhouses in the summertime and ironed for people too. It was hardworking. And every night we had supper. We all sat around the table, all 5 of us. And you sat around the table and you had meat and potatoes every night. It wasn't like, what's your menu going to be? Are you going to look up some fancy recipe? You had meat and potatoes. Sometimes a little vegetable thrown in, but that was our diet, and that's the way it was when I was growing up. There was a little neighborhood club that my mom belonged to, but there were neighbors right behind us that had a farm. And we would go up the hill to that farm, just a short little walk. So we felt like we were farmers. We would drive hay for it. We would do all of those things. They had pigs, they had chickens, they had horses. And when my kids grew up, grandkids, they would go stay with my mom, and they really felt that was my mom's farm. They didn't realize it was somebody else's, with the pigs, the horses walking up there. And right behind our home was their pigs. And we just got used to it. You could hear the pig sounds out there, and it wasn't very far from our back door. Of course, we didn't have air or anything, and the pigs were just out there. They were enclosed, and they weren't in our yard, all of that. So I'm just trying to think of the lot of fun things. And my brother was 9 years older, but he was always very kind, very nice. Didn't know him that well because he was 9 years older. But he worked in a factory after he graduated. But he worked a lot in a factory, in a gas station in Dyke. So everybody knew him, and he was just a nice person. And my sister, of course. When I was in high school, young, 14, 15 years old, a neighbor lady, because during the 50s there was a polio epidemic, and a neighbor lady friend was in the Georgia Polio Foundation, Warm Springs, Georgia, and she was paralyzed. She had been in an iron lung and was paralyzed, her whole body. They brought her home, and I worked there in the summertime, stayed there working with her 3 kids, and her husband taking care of her. It was just, it was just amazing. I have a picture here. I might put a picture out because I learned so much about her, about life. She sat in her wheelchair, and she couldn't do anything. But she taught me how to cook. She taught me how to freeze corn. She taught me how to make breakfast early in the morning. I did the laundry. It's the hardest I ever worked in my life, but in a loving way. But my sister worked there a year ahead of me, and we always said, can you imagine working that hard? when you're 14 or 15, what we did, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I was in the band, which was a big part of my high school. I played the flute, and we went to all the band competitions. We went to Visha and Ames and did all of these fun things, and went to band concerts in the summertime and played outside Dyke at the band concert. And people came and made popcorn and sat there. And my mom and dad always came and watched us and took us back and forth. Anyhow, I graduated from high school, and I had always wanted to be a nurse. From the time I was young, I was still in country school when I wanted to be a nurse, so I remember it was at least 4th grade. Fortunately, I got to go to nursing school. We didn't have any money for me to go there, but we borrowed money from a bank and borrowed money from Allen Hospital, where I went to school. It was kind of a unique experience because it was a 36-month nursing program that they don't even have anymore. And we went to UNI and also lived in the dorm, so we went back and forth by a bus to UNI. The first year after I started school, I was starting my 2nd year. It was Labor Day, and I got a phone call that my dad had had a stroke. He was going to an old threshers meeting, which is what they used to do, and it was in Mount Pleasant, and on the way home he had a stroke. His foot just went off the gas, and he was taken to the hospital, and he did not recover. Boy, the tougher part was for my mom. She was 57, had never lived alone, did not drive a car, really always was with my dad. They were very private people, very country people, and they just had each other. And another thing I'll say, and it's true, you know, somebody might say, well, yeah, nobody else was there. My parents just got along. They didn't argue, they didn't fight, they didn't holler, they didn't yell. Maybe people would say they were boring. I thought they were wonderful. And my mom was always very content in her circumstances. She had a hard time, but she was strong after my dad died. And my sister lived in Cedar Falls and was pregnant with a little baby, and God just kind of used that for her to get on with her life. Anyhow, then I started nursing school. It was a big venture. I was the first one in my family to go to college, and it was a very exciting time and very thankful time. I couldn't believe I was really going to be a nurse, what I'd always wanted to do. And at the time I thought it would be a big deal to wear a nurse's cap and be a real nurse. I went to Cook County in Chicago for my pediatrics and burn unit, and I went to Independence Mental Health Institute for 3 months there. Graduated in 1964. Most excited, but a little frightened because it's hard to be a nurse. It's a lot of responsibility, it's a lot of pressure. And as my one friend Sally says, it's a sacred calling. You're with somebody and it's not just a job. So I felt that way about nursing, and I got through nursing school in '64, and I chose to stay at Allen Hospital. In fact, I didn't choose to, I had to until my loans were paid back. So I got a job there, and the place that was open was the operating room. Now that was never my choice. You didn't even work with people. It was kind of, probably shouldn't say it, but to me it was kind of like working in a factory because you really didn't get to talk to people or see people. When my loans were paid off, I'd always been kind of a venturesome soul and felt like it would really be fun to get out of Dyke, get out of Waterloo, and venture out a little bit. So 2 girlfriends and I moved to California, the San Francisco Bay Area. We packed up to 54 green Plymouth with our Melmac dishes and everything and drove out there, and we went to Sacramento to get a nurse's license, and then we all had to work at the same hospital, the same shifts, because we only had 1 car. That's when my career in intensive care started, and it was wonderful. But almost every day we were there, we were homesick for Iowa. So we didn't stay that long, but we had to stay about a year because then it would really be hard coming home and say, we made this big venture to California, but we really want to be back home. So we came back home, and I started more intensive care. And that was at St. Francis Hospital. and intensive care units and coronary units were just starting. So they sent me to Phoenix for a month for coronary school. I went to the University of Iowa for coronary school. Then I set up a coronary unit and was head nurse and loved it. It's a wonderful pace, wonderful patients, wonderful memories. I feel like God really used me in that place. Again, I got a little restless and moved to Kansas City. And they needed intensive care nurses too. When I was at St. Francis, 3 of my friends scheduled a trip to Europe. I was their add-along. So I went to Europe with them for a period of time. And we flew to Ireland. We were in Ireland a week. We were in Switzerland. We were in Italy. We had an audience with the Pope. They were all 3 Catholic. So they said nothing I was holding was going to, they wanted everything blessed. They said it wouldn't work if I was holding it. That was a joke. It was a joke. Anyhow, I went along with them. So then we went to see the Reformation leaders. I think they were in Geneva, Switzerland. And we just had a wonderful time. So it was a big adventure in my life, too. Well, I forgot something. When I was at St. Francis, I was working with a gentleman, Merrill Hubble, and he kept telling me about his wonderful brother-in-law that was in Korea during the Vietnam War. Well, this wonderful person he was going to line me up with happens to be my husband of 50 years now. Anyhow, I moved to Kansas City and then loved it there. Kansas City General, it was a county hospital, and God's always put on my heart county hospitals, more needy people, and all of those things. And so I moved from Kansas City because Gary lived in Chicago. I moved there so we got to know each other better. He lived with his sister. I had a one-room apartment that was really kind of pathetic, but it worked out well and the price was right. And then we got married in 1970, moved to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And we've been here for 50 years. At that time, I was looking for a job again because I was moving here. And a friend worked at Kirkwood and said, I have a perfect job for you. Maybe you should go apply. So I applied at Kirkwood, and I worked there for 10 years. I taught in the program. It was called Orthopedic Physician Assistants, and most of them were Vietnam veterans, corpsmen, medics, and I worked there for 10 years. Then I took a break to have babies. Our first darling baby was born in 1973. The cutest, the most fun, the most blessed thing that ever happened to me and Gary. We could not believe that was really our baby. We spent a lot of time looking, crying, just amazed that that was our baby that God had given us. Then, a year and a half later, we had another baby. We went, oh my gosh, another darling baby. This one is as cute as the first one, but she was kind of tiny. Anyhow, her name was Katie. Now I had 2 little baby girls a year and a half apart. It was like living a dream. Going to Beaver Park, playing, reading books. Gary read books to them for at least an hour every morning, and they loved it, and he loved riding. Sometimes he'd ride to Beaver Park twice a day with them. People kind of looked at us like there was something wrong, but we did love our kids and loved being with them. They went to preschool, and then we were not going to have any more children because 2 was enough. And God said, I want you to have 1 more baby. We told this girl that nobody wanted her but God, so that was okay. So Caroline came along in 1979. Can't imagine what it would be like without 3 little girls, each one so uniquely and fearfully made. This is a joke. They are all so different. I said they all had different fathers. They really didn't, but they're pretty unique. One was a blonde, one was a redhead, one was a brunette. How could you get any better than that? And to this day, they're very special in our lives. They all have wonderful husbands, not perfect like Gary, but they all have wonderful husbands. We have 9 darling grandchildren. All 3 of our kids went to Grant Woods School. It was a little neighborhood school right behind our house. It was fun, it was wonderful, good teachers, all of that. And then they went to McKinley. McKinley was a very frightening place because I'd gone to a school with 3 in my class, and then one when I got to the big school, there were 40 in my class. And McKinley was a diverse school, and it was a unique school for us to have our kids go to. And it was absolutely wonderful. They would say it's probably 3 of the best years of their lives. They learned a lot, they made wonderful friends. And at that time, I started volunteering with Youth for Christ. Steve Russell was new in Youth for Christ and was doing a junior high program. So 4 of my friends and I started Youth for Christ for middle school. We did Roosevelt, we did all of these schools. And we did the pick up the kids, deliver them, do the program, do the snacks, do the games, all of it. Sarah Neff, Susan Nichols, Susan Kiram, and Mary Spice, and we're still in the same prayer group today, which is about 40 years later, a long time. But it was wonderful, it was good for our kids, and we got to meet a lot of these kids and their parents. It was truly a blessing. Then they went to Washington High School. Which was a big, wonderful school at the time. Kirsten loved music. She was involved in all kinds of music, show choir, etc., and loved it. Katie came along, following her 2 years. Her excellence turned out to be tennis. Her freshman year, she was on the varsity tennis team, made wonderful friends, and we loved going to all those events as much as we did the choral events too. Then the third one came along, Caroline, and she decided she would do both. So she did tennis and music, and they were all academically good students and went on from there to their chosen careers. Kirsten went to Co, got her degree there, and then went to Washington, D.C. to work as a legislative aide. Katie came along. She didn't really know what she wanted to do, and she chose to go on a mercy ship to Africa. She went all over for a year, year and a half, and she probably learned more than the other 2 did in 4 years at college. And then Caroline came along. She chose Co also, and her degree was in education, and she also got her master's in special ed. She retired the same month she got her master's degree to stay home and have babies. She has 3 babies, Katie has 4 babies, Kirsten has 3. The oldest grandchild is heading off to college, and she is 17. The youngest one is 7, so we had 9 babies in 10 years. So our life was pretty much taken up by babies. I quit working, going backwards a little bit, when I got pregnant with Kirsten. So that was, I quit working for a long time. Did a lot of volunteer work and all of that.
In 1984, I received a phone call that my brother, who was only 49 years old, had died of natural causes in his home in Dyke. I went to tell my mom. You can only imagine how devastating that was to hear her son had died. The toughest part was my mom had no further contact with his family. Again, she was strong, and God was her source of comfort. She didn't understand. It hurt, but she was hopeful that that would change. About 30 years later, God opened the door for me and Jenny Chatama, my brother's granddaughter, to become special friends, Jesus friends. I also have been in contact with Kevin, his son, and also Whitney, his granddaughter. That would all make my mom very happy. It was in God's timing, not ours.
I became a believer in 1977, became a Christ follower. I had a different direction in my life. Life looked differently, and I wasn't seeking to go to Europe, to go here, to be a head nurse, to do this, to do that. It put a different perspective in the whole in my life. We were in a couples group. Now it would probably be called a small group. We just called it a couples fun group, really. And I started getting involved in many things there. we have been attending since 1977. So it's been a huge part of our lives and my kids' lives. They were involved in youth group, youth friends, couples friends, all of these things. So New Covenant Bible Church has been a huge part of our life, and we're very thankful for that church that was started in the 50s by a group of people that were looking for a small church and started it, and it continues today. And probably one of my favorite old friends was Ella Mae Eggert. My little kids started Sunday school there when they were 2 and 3, and I had not been to a church like that. And I took them to the nursery, and there was this darling lady, Ella Mae Eggert, there. And she took care of my kids, and the kids couldn't wait to go back the next Sunday, which is a thrill when you have 2 and 3-year-olds. Then a couple years later, Ella Mae said, "Betty, I wanted to talk to you about something. Caroline likes to do twirls with her dress, and today she didn't have underwear on." I said, "Oh my gosh." So it's been a joke ever since. Obviously, she used the potty chair and didn't pull him up again, but that's been a joke with Ella Mae ever since. And I got to speak at her funeral. She was, I think, 101 years old. But many wonderful things. And then a little later in my life, I started with FCA. And FCA is Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And my friend Elaine Perry was head of the prayer team, and we became best friends. Other people thought they were her best friends, but they weren't. I was her best friend. Anyhow, she taught me a lot. I loved her a lot. And we loved Jesus a lot and learned a lot. And she passed away about 3 years ago. And it's been a void ever since. But God has replaced that and has said in more than one time, maybe I'm supposed to be your best friend, and the other friends are just fine. So that's another highlight in my life, was Elaine. And I have wonderful friends. I could begin to tell you. I've been in a prayer group with those same ones with Youth for Christ. I'm in another group that I probably can't say the name of it, but we get together once a month, and it's called our prayer team. But it's really having a glass of wine once a month. And that's Becky and Barb and Susan and me. And we have lots of fun and care about each other and love each other and would do anything for each other. That's pretty special.
My favorite verse since I was baptized in 2002 is Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. Acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight.
I love Christmas traditions. I love Christmas traditions. I love going Christmas caroling, wearing hats, packing in a van, packing in a bus, going someplace to Christmas carol. I love dancing around the Christmas tree. That's what Danish people do. That's what I did when I was growing up. You know, in the church auditorium, you would have all the kids singing around, taking hold of hands, all going one direction, the next row was going the other direction, and that's Christmas too. Now, nobody else is Danish but me, so I kind of rope them into it. They whine, but they do it. And then the other one, another one is Abelskivers. It's a Danish, kind of a Danish pancake, and we do that too. And my one son-in-law says they taste like funnel cakes from the, you know, from someplace, but they're not. They're Danish and they're special. Anyhow, I like everything Danish. I like Danish plates. We do cooking. We do make cookies once a year. We still do that, Danish cookies. We get together at one of the daughters' house, and my niece Carla makes the best Danish cookies. And we have aprons that say Sorensen Baking Team and Velkommen, which is welcome. So I'm Danish. The other thing is we have a lot of, another thing, we, how do I say it? We didn't have money to take our kids to Disney World, to here, to there, to all those big things. But every year for the last, I can't even remember how many years, because we did it with our kids too, our vacation was Adventureland. And there's nothing better than Adventureland. I see it and I think, who would want to go to Disneyland when you have Adventureland? You know where everything is, you've been there, all this stuff. Lots of pictures, lots of pictures. And they all have shirts too. You have to have shirts. And this was when they all got glasses. This is when Papa turned 75. So they all got glasses like he has and put them on. So we have pictures up all over. Okay, this is just one more. because everybody always had shirts. Then when the kids got a little older, won't mention any names, last year, the year before, they felt, some of them, the older ones, felt like it was a little dorky to wear shirts with your grandma's name on it. And these say, I'm Nanny, because this was for my 75th. Anyhow, we'll do a final hurrah with this one. I forgot something, guys. The most important member of our family for 16 years, for 16 years, for 16 years, slept with us, cried with us, went everywhere with us, looked back and forth across the street, going across Forest Drive so he didn't get hit. Wonderful, wonderful, fun memories with Patches the cat. That is kind of a big deal. I mean, you know, it was our cat for 16 years. And they had to come, when it had to be, it was going to die. And everybody had to come home and see it too. I mean, it wasn't like you just let that cat die. You had to go to the vet and tell it goodbye and all of those things. So, another fond memory. Another very important person in our lives was Julie Snyder. In 1973, we bought our home from her parents, and she was a little girl then, 12 years old. But she happened to be the best babysitter, best friend our kids ever had. Juju, they called her, because she couldn't even. She took care of Kirsten, and then Katie was born, and Katie was a baby a year and a half later, and she could take care of both of those little kids. She played with them and played with them. And Caroline was flower girl in her wedding, and Julie has a big place in our life. One other memory that's really funny. We had a fence that went around our house on Forest Drive, and that was going to be torn down. So my brother-in-law, the one that introduced us, came out, and they made a little house in the backyard. It was called a cat house. It was for the cats, anyone that wanted to stay there. Now, our neighbors were nice. We backed up to a school. We didn't live in a prestigious neighborhood, but we painted. We let them paint the house whatever they wanted. It was a pink cat house in our backyard. It wasn't very big, but the cats could be in there. Enough said. If you could see that pink cat house, the kids have to laugh. Lots of fun memories, lots of fun memories. We, you know, if I live one more day, I've lived enough. I'm thankful for the life God has given me. I have been blessed beyond measure. I don't want to cry. The end. And now we're at the, you know, you almost say it with tears in your eyes, we're at kind of the winter season of our life. And you look at things a little bit differently than you did 25 years ago, 35 years ago. We're 78. You look at the obituaries, and most people are younger than we are. And you try to live each day more intentionally, knowing it could be your last. Not that I couldn't live to be 100, but your perspective is different on life and people and friends and interests and why you're doing things and why you want to do things. So I'm thankful for that. And I have been blessed in many ways. And again, I'm repetitious, by friends. There's nothing more important than friends. If you have some friends, you're pretty blessed. Now, I think I could wrap this up unless I could go on for another 2 days, because I have lots of pictures. My mom, I went through pictures last night. I have this notebook that's unbelievable that my mom had made for me, starting with the cutest babies, my birth announcement, a picture of my first curl that she cut out a picture of, my first curl that they cut off in 1948. It's still there. Anyhow, so I could go on for a few days if you want to. Then I have all my grade school, high school, all those pictures, 4-H, all those wonderful things. So I won't, but I just want to say okay, 2 things. I want to just go through. This is my dad, and that's his dad and his grandpa. pretty special picture to me from many, many years ago. And this other one is my mom's sisters and brother, and that's an old picture too. So, but now, most of all, I want to share 3 pictures. Of course, I think we have, this is a picture of the whole wedding party. Can you see that okay? And then my brother, he gave me away. Then, I don't cry that easily, but I could cry for this. These are my 2 people in my life that have left the biggest impact on me. My mom and my sister. Not in words they have said to say certain things, how they lived their lives. How they each one lived their lives is quite amazing. My mom was always content in her circumstances. She was caring, she was loving, she wasn't self-centered, she was just a selfless person that lived her whole life like that. And she passed away at 94 in a care center in Cedar Falls. And this is my sister. My sister's a year and a half older, and I've always said she's my older sister. I don't want anyone to get mixed up who's the oldest. She has been my friend for 78 years, and I am thankful for that. What she has taught me. She has had struggles in her life. My life hasn't been all smooth either, but she's been there and she's taught me a lot about Jesus. God blessed me with Gary, the husband he chose for me 50 years ago. He is more than I deserved, but I am thankful that I am blessed by Gary. Has our marriage been easy and perfect? No, because we're both imperfect people. He's more imperfect. Just kidding. But anyhow, we have been together 50 years, and it's been some of the most wonderful times you can imagine. I wouldn't want to have it any other way with any other person. And I thank Jesus for that. Now, if whoever is watching this, I hope you can see my heart. I'm not a public speaker. I can see my girls say, Mom, I can't believe you're doing that. You don't even talk in front of people. So I'm not a public speaker, but I want people, my grandkids, maybe their kids, to know who their grandma was and what their heritage was. But the biggest heritage is knowing Jesus, because then we can celebrate and party forever. And my favorite verse is Numbers 6, 24 to 26. And you'll have to look that up. But God bless you.